Thanks for coming. Just a couple of people that I don't know if we've agreed to terms with Alex Chason on a 2-year contract, and we've also agreed to a entry-level contract with Gaetan Haas, a Swiss player. We've got one sheet of his contract, but he needs to sign 2, so expect that to be done today or later tomorrow. So those are in additions to, obviously you're aware of Mike Smith and Marcus Granlund. I'm not sure who else so open for questions.
I know heading into free agency, looking for supplementary scoring was something that was high up on the priority list. Maybe just discuss that pursuit and where you think you are with that.
Well, I think, when I was announced 2 months ago, what I was hoping to accomplish over the summertime, still 2 months to go, obviously was to get another goaltender to go with Koskinen. Obviously, Dave Tippett had Mike Smith in Dallas. I think they were together. Very, very competitive guy. He can handle a puck. He's a motivated athlete. We talked to him a couple of times this week, so we feel good about our tandem and goal. And then on the back end, we wanted to create more competition. We need to find more players that can get double-digit goals. Marcus Granlund is a player that I think the last 3 years had 19. I think he scored 8 in about 50-something games. He had 12 goals last year. So we think his resume says that he should be able to score double-digit goals. And we've signed we signed Nygaard from Sweden. We've signed Gaetan Haas from Switzerland. I know Thomas Jurko. Obviously, we drafted him in Detroit. We're trying to create more competition at the bottom part of the roster. We're also trying to have the bottom part of the roster play with more pace. Obviously signed Puljujarvi to a 2-year contract, and so we think that we've started that. Don't think that we're done, but that's part of where we're at.
All right. So just to follow up, made the decision yesterday you did on Sakura to buy him out to create a
yes.
space. You said you're not done, but in a perfect world with a lot of these deals seem to be shorter-term deals, and is that also part of sort of the mindset and the approach that you have? And then maybe just a thought on the opportunities that open up on defense with Sakura now out of the mix.
Well, the Sakura decision was tough. I don't know him, but certainly in talking to all the people around here that have worked with him on an everyday basis, they hold him in the highest regard. One of the things that, when I was in Detroit, I have great respect for pros and the guys that come, they're role models, and that certainly was what was laid out to me in Sakura, was that he was a role model. He's had a tough couple of years, the last 2 years. I think he's played 60 games in the last 2 years combined. Obviously, the injury bug has hit him big time. And I would say that, we needed to create some cap space and some opportunity to do some things. And I also think that we're trying to get some of the younger defensemen to have an opportunity heading into training camp. The guys that played in, the young defensemen that played in Bakersfield. So that was ultimately all the reasoning around the buyout. Again, we have a little bit of cap space left. We'll see what so on the 1-year contract, certainly that was part of the philosophy is trying to be competitive. I think when I stood here two months ago, on the short term we want to compete for the playoffs in 1920. On the longer term, we want to try to build. Certainly, the building is going to be about some of the drafting and the developing, and ultimately, the pushing players through the system onto your roster. There's some young players here that they're going to need some time, but I think they can be real important players to this team going forward. But in the short term, we need more competition. Want to get more pace to the bottom part of the roster. Obviously, in Mike Smith, we think we've got 2 goaltenders that we can create a competition. Both are hard workers. Both are really competitive. We believe they're going to push one another to play real well and allow us to have goaltending as a strength. Now we'll see what that's sort of where we're at today.
You're really kind of outlined your plan a month ago and didn't deviate. You said you weren't going to bring in anybody really on defense and looked at forward, bottom six, and goaltending. When you look at your defense now and what you have on the right side, and you look at guys maybe who aren't big puck movers, so do you look at like a Pearson or a Benning or even Jones to play on his offside to be able to be the puck movers on your right defense this year?
You know, I think that question you've asked, some of those are going to be answered in training camp. I think we got to get to training camp. We got to play preseason games. We got to play games. I think that's one of the reasons why, at pick 8 we took Broberg. The importance of defense in the National Hockey League today. So, you got Samorukov, you got Bouchard, you got Broberg, young defensemen. They're going to need some time. But we've got some defensemen in Bakersfield, Lagesson, Persson's coming over obviously from Sweden. You got Jones, Bear, might have missed somebody, but they're players that they can compete for spots in training camp. So I think that ultimately, as I weighed whether we stood pat and didn't buy out Sakura, or we did, at the end of the day, we needed some cap space to try to create a little bit of opportunity to do something. But also the push of defensemen, I think that's one of the strengths of this organization. And the top 4 guys you're talking about, for the most part, top 4s, you got to do one of 2 things. You've either got to draft them and develop them, or you got to pay a ton of money to get them. And we don't have a ton of money to get them, and I think we do have top 4 defensemen, but I'm not sure that they're ready right now, but I believe they're pushing through the system.
And in Granlund, when you sign him, is the plan to have him as a center, even though he's played a lot of wing in Vancouver, and similar with Puljujarvi? Where do you see those two fitting in the lineup?
Well, he can play all 3 positions. We talked to him. I think he's most comfortable on the wing. He can play center. As we sit here today, obviously we need a 3rd-line center. Gaetan Haas is a center. Puljujarvi can play center. Granlund can play center, but certainly we're on the lookout to see if we can find another guy between now and training camp that can play center. Jim, over there.
Jason.
Yes.
Circle back to him, or what was the reasoning there?
Circle back in what term?
Well, he waited a while.
I talked to him about 2 weeks ago. To his agent, Pat Morris. I'm not sure if it was about 2 weeks ago, and then talked to him, I think, early this week. And I think that, obviously, he had 22 goals. He's popular in the locker room. He's a right shot. We wanted to explore the market, and I think in the cap world, what you try to do is you try to get the most bang for your buck on every signing. Not everyone works out. We wanted to explore the market. I stayed in touch with Pat Morris. Pat and I had a sort of a joke today when we talked to Alex. I think this week, Pat Morris might have called me at 10 o'clock every night, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And, Alex Chason was one of the people that we talked about. So I've been in touch with Alex's camp, with his agent, all week.
And one more, you don't have a top 6 forward, a winger for Nugent Hopkins to play with yet. Are you still looking for one of those?
Always looking, Jim, always looking, yeah.
Was Nyquist just too expensive, or what? Because you know him from Detroit.
I think, what, he had 5.5 cap number? It's a big number. I'm happy for Gus. I'm happy for Gus. I say that facetiously. It's obviously when you look at our team and you put down what's committed, it was a big number for us.
Ken, you mentioned you do have some cap room at your disposal. How close do you want to get to the cap before training camp? And do you envision now that it'll be a trade that you'd have to make to augment the lineup aside from, rather than a free agent sign?
I think when we get to training camp, I think you'd like to be at least, $1.5 million. You'd like to have a player for, you're not going to go any less than $1 million less, closer to the cap, because it's $925. I think ideally you'd love to be, you know, 1.5 to 2 below the cap, so that you've got at any point in time you can bring up a couple of players, 2 or 3 players, depending on what their cap number is, 700 to 900. Is that? Yes.
Yeah, that's the question. I think when when we build your lines on a notepad today,
Yep.
your top 6 still has, maybe a couple of bottom 6 guys in it, maybe a couple guys, certainly a guy like Nygaard or somebody who has never played here. I don't want to ask if you're satisfied with it, but how much work does it need before it can get a passing grade in your top 6 by training camp?
Well, I won't give any grades to training camp until I watch the players on the ice, Mark. I wouldn't have a clue. I got to watch them play. Certainly, we'd like to add another player that has the potential to score 20 goals. We'll see if we can make that happen.
So can the agent for Brett Connolly mentioned that Edmonton was certainly in the mix there. Wayne Simmons might have made sense, especially given the term length of his deal. Is it a different challenge in Edmonton? Not that it's Edmonton, just that it's in the West versus guys that have spent a number of years playing in the Eastern Conference. Some guys like to stay out east. Does it limit the pool a bit, or?
I didn't find that at all. I think at the end of the day, it's everything. Your decisions are cap related today, and I think at the end of the day, all the names that you're going to mention up front, other than the guys that commanded, 8, 9, 10, $11 million salaries. For the most part, I talked to all of them or their agents for sure, and I think that it was. Again, I think it's cap related. I think it's about how much cap space you got. Those teams today that made a lot of noise had a ton of cap space, and it goes in cycles. And somewhere down the road, we're going to have a ton of cap space, and somebody else isn't going to have a ton of cap space. So right now, we don't have a ton of cap space. We're going to bring in play. You just heard the plan. Somewhere down the road, we're going to have a ton of cap space, and we're going to make noise. But certainly, when you've got the core of players here that this organization's got, it's very intriguing to players outside to play with those kind of players.
Ken, this is your first time in this fishbowl. All your years in hockey and everything like that. Can you contrast?
Detroit was a fishbowl too.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, but in this particular one, can you contrast what this last 2 months have been like for you? And also, I mean, I have to tell you, to the extent this fan base is starving but their expectations were somewhere up there. Is there a sense of disappointment from that point of view in what you were able to deliver?
I try to make decisions with no emotion, and I would say to you, I try to live in a cocoon as much as I can. And you come, we were here every day from Sunday. I think we showed up here at 7:30 and went home at 7:30 and worked the phones, talked to people, had our lineup on the board, looked at our cap space, looked at our commitments, looked at the other side of the board with our prospects to project when those players, would hit this side of the board. We did that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And you wake up today. So to me, it's about the process. It's about every day going about the process that eventually when you got to make a decision, you've made a decision based upon all the information at hand. And unless you sit in that room and you're in the room of the 31 organizations, you don't have all that information. I've been on the phone with the agents. I've talked to every general manager in the National Hockey League. We've looked at the board, we've looked at everything, and you go and you eventually make a decision based upon all that information. Lots of people don't have all that information, the information that I've got at hand. So I don't have any disappointment whatsoever. We made the decisions based upon all the information at hand.
Ken, to paraphrase, you kind of said that to be in the free agent game, you have to be willing or comfortable to overpay, or else you're not going to be in the game. And so today, did you feel that the players that commanded the money they did, it was a little too out of your out of your price range, comfort range to ultimately go those 4 years or multiple large contracts for players today?
Did I feel?
The market, I guess, too high.
No, I don't. I don't think so. No, I think again, and I was just saying to Terry, based upon all the information, I made the decision. Whatever decision I made or didn't make was based upon a lot of research, a lot of talk, a lot of planning, looking forward, and trying to determine where we are today and where we want to get to. So. I've been a manager. I've been a manager for 22 years. I know when it's time to pay, and when it's time not to pay. But I also know that every decision, we talked about this, not every decision works out. But you gotta go through a process eventually to make your decisions. And on the short, you're hearing the same things over again because on the short term, we're trying to compete for a playoff spot in 1920. But ultimately, I'm trying to oversee and build this team into being a really good elite team in the Western Conference. And we made decisions today based upon those plans.
And you signed Kara to the 2-year contract.
Yep.
Last year he didn't do very well. You do that because he's your own player and you haven't seen much of him and you're hoping that he breaks through. 3 goals last year in Sydney.
Yeah, we had 11 the year before. You need dimensions, Jim. Everybody's not the same size and the same skill set. He's a big guy that brings a different dimension to our hockey club. He can play in the center. He can play left wing. He's a big guy. Again, I lived in Detroit. I'm certainly counting on, or not listening to the information of the people that are here on an everyday basis. And again, he had 11 goals 2 years ago. He had a tough year last year, 3 goals. So, when you look in the guide and record book at lots of players, in some years they don't have very good years statistically. So we're expecting him to bounce back and be closer to the player he was 2 years ago.
Where are you on Mr. Puljujarvi, who doesn't want to play here?
Where am I in Jesse? I've talked to a lot of teams. Not sure where I'm at, but talked to a lot of teams about a lot of different ideas about Jesse. So I'm not sure where it's going to go. We'll see.
Just to follow up on that, Ken, are you to play the patient game with that? We've seen a lot of young guys, at different times, or even older players get frustrated for whatever reason. Is patience the key here? You don't feel like you're in a position where you have to be rushed into anything?
Well, I think when I make a decision, it's got to be in the best interest of the team, and until there's something that I think makes really good sense to our team, I won't pull the trigger. So nothing has. Certainly, he's expressed frustration and disappointment at the way things have gone in his Oiler career. Obviously you guys talked to I think Mark talked to his agent 10 days ago or something and he doesn't, I don't think he's planning on playing for the Edmonton Oilers, but I've had players tell me that in Detroit, and they did play for Detroit. So, and in some cases they've told me that, and they didn't play, and I ended up trading him. But ultimately, I think the most important thing is, if I do trade him, it's got to be a deal that I feel good about, that I think is in the best interest of this team. And if something like that isn't out there, then Jesse's going to have to make a decision.